Hello, it's Kapil, and I'm doing the quarterly update for fall 2016 for LESS, Low Effort Sensing. So to give a quick background of what LESS is, what we have in the real world is a ton of physical space that offer really interesting dynamic data that we would love to collect and we love to be able to provide to other people. But it's very, very hard to do so right now with current systems. The way we have right now is you can either use machine sensing systems to get things like, for example, traffic at a location or like on the streets, but you can't use that to ask any compelling questions about very specific things that are happening in a location. For example, like how much does something cost if there's nothing that has that shown there. On the other hand, you have systems that allow you to survey people for information, but those systems are typically very high in participation cost. And that means that the overall user participation goes down because the only people who would want to use it are those who are very dedicated to the sensing task. What we propose instead is a system that allows people to contribute opportunistically when they go past task locations. And these contributions are very simple, low-effort contributions that take at most 2 or 3 seconds to do. And because of that, it's not something that's going to be intrusive in their daily lives, and we argue that this is going to be a way to entice people to respond more. So this leads to 2 research questions. The first is, the first is, can we create a system that elicits these type of responses and that is not intrusive in a user's daily life? And the second problem is, given that we have this system, and we're getting these really simple, small, low-effort contributions from people, can we take those contributions and scaffold them up together to create higher fidelity data sets that you'd see in applications like Yelp or Foursquare or any of these other survey applications that we look at? So this quarter, the quarter was roughly split into 2 parts. The first was doing a lot of design work to figure out how LESS fits into people's lives and how we can make a compelling case for design of LESS for a user, why a user might want to use it, and what would be good to them. The other part was spending time validating the second research question about data scaffolding and seeing how context builds on itself, because this was something that wasn't able to be done in the study in the spring. So let's start with the design of LESS. So one of the big things about LESS is you have a place that you can view all the information that you have. And there are a lot of other systems that do this, systems like Yelp and Foursquare, for example. What we wanted to do here is we wanted to see how each of these other systems that is able to provide users data. And then what we can learn from that and also what we can build into LESS. And roughly there's 2 things that we see. We see that a lot of these compelling platforms have a big social component to them, specifically Foursquare, Swarm, and Google contributions. With each of those, the big thing that you see is that how many things you're contributing, how many things are your friend contributing, and a big gamification of this idea of contributing information to people. The other part of it, which is seen a lot more in Yelp and Google as well, is per location you have these information profiles that give you things like, of course, location, time that they're open, but then you start seeing more interesting things like, is this a good place to work, or like recommendations for what you should eat, etc. So from this, we were able to develop some user class of also how people would interact with the device. And what we see is that you roughly have 3 different types of users. You have people who are really active in the community and are primary responders, those who will walk by locations that haven't been marked and will mark it so that other people can start contributing data to it. They also might be people who just want to learn more about that location for themselves. You then have secondary responders, who are the people who will go past the location, be notified, and answer the questions. And finally, you have the data consumer, who wants to be able to either see what's been done for a specific location, or even be able to query information for certain locations or query a very specific piece of information for those locations. So this led to some storyboarding where we storyboard out some scenarios. And a big thing was that for users to be drawn to a system like this, much like they would be drawn to a system like Yelp or Foursquare, you need to have some level of data already available to show that there is something there. Because even though the system can support people marking notifications and responding to things, there's no draw for them to actually have it installed on their phone unless they're able to get some data back. And this was validated earlier on through post-study surveys in the spring where all my users said that they would like the application because it feels like you get something and you give something back. The other thing that we worked on is to build out a system for gamifying it. And we started very simple with just a very simple leaderboard that shows the ranking of everyone who's contributed and how much they've contributed. This is okay as a start, but the reason less is really cool is because we can divide our users up into these type of user classes. Are they here? We can actually begin to show these leaderboards in a way that are a little bit more interesting. So, for example, we can actually begin to show things like chaining, where we can have for a specific location a profile of the first person who reported it, and then a chain of other people who have answered the questions to see how the data builds up. So that work will be done more next quarter. Finally, there was a user study that was ran for a few days at the end of the quarter. That study was limited in space to be just around the north end of campus, so that we could focus the study and we could focus the participants who were there, so that we can get more data scaffolding and see if that interaction was working and the context building was happening. So for this, we originally have 3 scenarios. Guest events, which are basically any type of guest events that are happening in a physical space. Specifically, we're looking at indoor events. So for this, we also implemented beacons, which I'll talk a little bit more about in the demo. The second one was window drawings, where I would draw little letter number combinations on a window and see if people could scaffold information about like the location of it, the colors, and what orientation they were in. And the final one, which didn't happen due to the weather, was free food at Brewbike. So Brewbike would give out food to anyone who used less and responder notifications about Brewbike when they were selling food. Instead of that, we actually used something with donuts in the Delta Lab and the hackerspace. It's another way to test the indoor tracking as well. It's the same idea in that you'd go near the Delta Lab or hackerspace and there was information to build up on where the donuts were and what type of donuts were there. With that, we'll start a demo. Okay, so we'll begin the demo now. You get a notification saying that, hey, there seems to be a lot of people at Coffee Lab, and how loud is it here? If you force touch the notification or swipe to the left on older iPhones, you'll see a list of options that you can answer the question with. So let's say that it's not very loud right now, so we'll do light conversation. And it's done. There's nothing else that you have to do in order to submit data. Now let's say instead that you want to mark a location. You swipe over to the left, and then you'd see this widget that lets you select what you want to mark your current location as. So let's say I want to mark it as a guest event. In doing this, the first thing that will actually happen is Les will now check to see if you're within the range of any beacons indoor. And if you are, it'll actually use that to mark your location rather than your geolocation. This is to increase the amount of accuracy you have in getting notifications at the right spot when you're doing indoor tracking. So we'll mark this as a guest event. We'll swipe over to dismiss, and the location's marked. Now, if we open up less, we can see things that have been marked. So over here is Coffee Lab, and if we click for more information, we can see the type of data that's been scaffolded in so far. Additionally, I can view locations that I've marked. So I've marked a lot of locations over here by Ford, for example, and over here by the garage, where I want to see if there's where there's free food that I want to report to other people. I can also look at the leaderboard to see how many contributions different people have. This is done by taking a weighting of the number of places that you contribute to by just answering questions, and then marking new locations. And we weight that a little bit higher as to encourage people to want to contribute more actual locations rather than just responding to notifications passively. And that's it.